Breaking news tonight regarding the Presley dynasty as Riley Keough, the sole trustee of the estate, steps forward with unprecedented disclosures concerning the future of Graceland and a solemn vow made to her late mother. For a staggering period exceeding 40 years, the upper level of the Memphis mansion has remained a fortress strictly barring all entry, with zero photographs, no guided tours and absolutely no exemptions for the public. However, in a major development for 2026, Keough is finally shattering that long-standing code of silence, and initial reports indicate that her revelations are nothing short of astounding. We are receiving reports of concealed architectural features correspondence sealed for decades, unheard audio tapes and private truths that have remained buried until this very moment. In a candid statement, Keough noted that her proximity to her mother, the late Lisa Marie, meant she was already deeply embedded in the complex logistical operations of the historic property. Speculation is running rampant. Does a subterranean passage actually exist beneath the foundation? Did the king leave behind master tapes that have never been broadcast? And why does one specific chamber remain frozen in time, unchanged since the day of his passing? Join us as we conduct a deep dive investigation into Graceland, looking past the facade to understand its significance as more than just a celebrity residence. A strict embargo remains in effect: no press cameras, no sightseers and no special waivers. For over 4 decades, the entire second story has been treated as a consecrated zone, sealed off like a pristine time capsule. Even the most dedicated historians and fan clubs who have followed the Presley legacy for generations have never been granted visual access to these private quarters. But tonight, for the first time in history, we are obtaining a primary account from the only individual currently authorised to walk through those forbidden barriers. The granddaughter of the icon Riley Keough is bringing to light the intimate and emotionally charged reality of what truly resides on the second floor of the estate. The pressing questions remain. What was the music legend shielding in his private sanctuary, and why has the family maintained such a rigorous blockade for nearly half a century? Furthermore, what discovery has Keough made that completely alters the historical narrative? To fully grasp the gravity of this situation, we must examine the property's origins. The story does not commence with global stardom or chart-topping hits, but with the bricks and mortar of a residence that was not always destined for international recognition. Historical records show the property began as a respectable but modest colonial revival structure erected in 1939 by S.C. Keough, a prominent local figure in the commercial printing industry. At the time of construction, the estate was situated on a secluded tract of land in the rural outskirts, offering tranquility amidst rolling pastures and agricultural fields. Comprising merely 10 rooms, the architecture was designed to project dignity rather than opulence, featuring classical white pillars and a traditional frontage that whispered elegance. Fast forward to 1957, and a 22-year-old cultural phenomenon named Elvis Presley had just achieved the pinnacle of his early career explosion. Reports from that era describe him as increasingly agitated and besieged by mobs desperately seeking a fortress to escape the relentless pressure of his newfound celebrity status. That same year, he secured the deed to Graceland for a sum of $102,500, a figure often misreported alongside the $12,500 down payment. It was not the square footage or the grandeur that appealed to the young star. It was the promise of isolation. However, that solitude would prove to be incredibly short-lived. Presley immediately initiated a series of renovations to metamorphose the house into a structure that far exceeded a simple getaway, crafting it into a physical manifestation of his larger-than-life persona over the next 20 years. The resulting aesthetic was vibrant, erratic, unapologetically bold, and deeply reflective of his unique private life. One of the most significant expansions occurred in the late 1960s, resulting in a chamber that has since achieved a legendary status, rivaling the artist himself. Known as the Jungle Room, this space is infamous for its green shag carpeting, which extends even to the ceiling, and its collection of heavy carved Polynesian-style furnishings. This was far from a standard domestic living area. Observers know it resembled a tropical rainforest lounge rather than a component of a traditional southern manor. The area also functioned as a professional recording environment where Presley engineered some of his final vocal performances, including the tracks for the album Moody Blue. The atmosphere was described as eccentric and moody, mirroring the artist's complex personality. Beyond the walls lies the meditation garden, situated directly to the rear of the main structure. Commissioned in 1964, this stone-lined sanctuary would eventually serve as the final resting place for the king, his parents, his grandmother, and tragically his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. Pilgrims from every corner of the globe travel to this specific location to stand in respectful silence. The site is perpetually adorned with handwritten tributes, bouquets, and sentimental tokens left by the grieving public. It stands as a rare zone where the frantic energy of Presley fandom de-escalates into solemn reflection. Since opening its gates in 1982, the estate has hosted over 20 million visitors. Analysts suggest this is not merely a tourist attraction, but a site of cultural pilgrimage for music historians and devotees alike. Individuals from every continent traverse these halls seeking a tangible connection to the man who single-handedly revolutionised the trajectory of pop culture. Official tourism statistics confirm that Graceland remains the second most visited private residence in the United States, trailing only the Executive Mansion in Washington, D.C. Yet despite the comprehensive tours showcasing his gold records, iconic jumpsuits and automobile collection, there remains a significant void in public access. One specific sector remains strictly prohibited. The upstairs living quarters are not merely closed, they are under total lockdown. The area has been meticulously preserved, remaining virtually untouched since the tragic events of August 16, 1977. This preservation fuels a mystery that continues to captivate historians. What specific artefacts are located on the second level, and why are security measures so extreme? Furthermore, what narratives are trapped within those walls? For decades, access has been restricted to a microscopic circle of blood relatives and essential personnel. Sources close to the family clarify that this secrecy is not driven by the need to hide scandalous material or illicit activities. The restriction exists because the Presley family views that specific suite as consecrated ground, too personal for public consumption. The master suite, where he slept, the bathroom where he passed, and the wardrobe containing his personal effects remain suspended in time. Riley Keough has spent her entire life navigating the mythology of Graceland, and her perspective is unique. As the daughter of Lisa Marie and the direct descendant of Elvis, her bond with the estate is visceral, and she is now offering the world a rare glimpse into the true significance of those sealed chambers. Tonight, we turn our attention to the second floor of the world's most famous rock and roll residence, a sanctuary where Elvis Presley retreated from the glare of the spotlight. It was within these walls that the king read, composed, mourned, and ultimately came undone. While the mansion is renowned for its public grandeur, this upper level remains a silent, invisible fortress. However, historians and family members alike argue that this secluded area serves as the most critical chapter in the Presley saga. The magnetism of Graceland extends far beyond the velvet ropes of the public tours. It lies in the mysteries that remain concealed. Riley Keough's recent disclosures regarding the upper floor provide the public with an unprecedented perspective. We are gaining more than mere physical access. We are acquiring deep comprehension. The items she discovered behind those secured doors are not simply collector's items or memorabilia. They represent tangible memory, intensely private, incredibly raw, and startlingly real. Tonight, the world finally hears the truth she is prepared to share. This is a special report. Riley Keough unlocks the long-guarded secrets and revelations of the Graceland upstairs. For nearly 5 decades, this specific zone has remained strictly prohibited. No tourist groups, absolutely no video recording equipment, and zero photography allowed. The second level of the estate, the very space where Elvis Presley lived out his final days and tragically passed away, was hermetically sealed, shielded from even his most devout followers. However, in an unprecedented manoeuvre that caught industry insiders off guard, Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, and the sole proprietor of the estate as of 2026, has broken her silence. Her disclosures are being described as nothing short of astonishing. Concealed behind the doors of that upper corridor are confidential details that have never before left the inner circle of the Presley family. We are talking about personal correspondence, secret compartments, and entire living quarters that remain frozen in a specific moment in history. The question remains, why did the king of rock and roll maintain such strict isolation in this wing? Furthermore, political and cultural analysts are asking, why has Ms. Keough chosen this specific moment in time to declassify these secrets? For years, conspiracy theorists have postulated that the second floor remained restricted to conceal a more complex truth allegations that the singer never actually perished and that the living quarters were merely a stage set. Fringe elements have even asserted that the Presley estate was protecting the death scene of an imposter, claiming the real Elvis had fled to South America to live in anonymity. Riley Keough has categorically dismantled those theories, going on record to confirm that the upstairs suites are preserved in the exact state they were in on the day of the tragedy. The preservation is not an act of concealment, but rather an act of emotional preservation stemming from the overwhelming grief attached to the space. According to her testimony, walking into those rooms creates the illusion that he simply stepped out for a moment. Every item remains in situ, his wardrobe, his vinyl collection, and the literature resting on his nightstand. Visitors to the private quarters report the lingering scent of his cologne and a palpable presence within the architecture. The area has been essentially time-locked since August 16th, 1977. This was not a policy implemented by corporate museum directors or tour logistics managers. It was a direct executive order from the family. Vernon Presley, the late patriarch, personally guaranteed that the upper level would remain a sealed zone, intending it not as a marketing ploy, but as a consecrated private sanctuary. In the nearly 50 years since the rooms have not been purged, redecorated or updated to fit modern sensibilities. In a haunting detail, the clock mounted above the master bed remains halted at the precise minute the paramedics arrived on the scene. Ms. Keough, who spent a significant portion of her youth on the estate, recounts illicitly sneaking up the staircase while the general public toured the ground floor exhibits. Although she and her cousins were under strict instructions to disturb nothing, they observed in silence, absorbing the atmosphere of a world suspended in amber. The location that left the most indelible mark on her memory was Elvis's private study, a compact, dimly lit chamber panelled in dark timber, overflowing with texts regarding numerology, Christian theology, and Eastern mysticism. Discovered among these volumes were personal ledgers containing the artist's own handwritten introspections on the nature of celebrity, spiritual longing, and profound isolation. Riley characterises certain passages as bearing the distinct weight and structure of written supplications or prayers. Other documents appear more volatile fragments of uncompleted compositions, stream of consciousness narratives, and hastily scrawled quotations. In one particularly telling instance, she describes a single page covered entirely with the word "free" repeated obsessively. Beyond the documents, there are physical artifacts that Ms. Keough suggests provide a forensic glimpse into her grandfather's psychological state. The master bed, still draped in the original silk linens, is flanked by nightstands. One holds a Bible thick with marginalia, the other is cluttered with pharmaceutical vials, some of which remain full. Concealed directly underneath the bed frame, Riley discovered a shoebox bearing a stark handwritten warning, "Do not open." The contents revealed a cache of unsent correspondence, including a letter specifically addressed to his daughter, the late Lisa Marie Presley. Another envelope bore the ominous inscription, "To whoever finds this after I am gone." Riley admits these artifacts are far too intimate to ever be released into the public domain. Nevertheless, she acknowledges their existence, noting that reading them has fundamentally altered her perception of the man behind the legend. Regarding the adjacent master bath, the site of the singer's passing, nearly every element remains undisturbed. While Riley declines to provide graphic details out of familial respect, she confirms the space is untouched. Not a single towel has been laundered or replaced. The room is secured with a reverence typically reserved for a religious shrine or mausoleum. However, the Presley family emphasises that this location represents more than the site of a national tragedy. It served as a deeply secluded bunker where Elvis would frequently sequester himself to escape the crushing expectations of the external world. Riley reports that he spent countless hours within those walls, reading, engaging in meditation, or simply existing in silence. The bathroom, much like the bedroom, functioned as a refuge. Perhaps the most intriguing revelation is a space never cited in official Graceland documentation, a chamber Riley refers to as the Quiet Room. This compact concealed alcove located at the terminus of the upstairs corridor was specifically commissioned by Elvis to serve as a dedicated meditation zone. Outfitted with ambient lighting, floor cushions, and the persistent hum of a vintage white noise machine, this room was the artist's primary destination for prayer, reflection, and escape. No photographs of this sanctum exist, and until now, no fan was even aware of its existence. We are receiving breaking reports regarding previously classified accounts details that remained unknown until Riley Keough brought them to light. She maintains that these documents represent one of the most authentic insights into his character. This was a figure perpetually seeking sanctuary, a man attempting to find peace while the entire world refused to avert its gaze from him. The question being asked by analysts tonight is, why has she chosen this specific moment to break her silence? Riley indicates that for decades, the upper quarters of the residence were kept quiet out of sheer necessity. Her late mother, Lisa Marie, maintained a fiercely protective cordon around that section of the estate. It was deemed too traumatic, too hallowed, and far too unresolved to share with the public. However, following the tragic passing of Lisa Marie, Riley has found herself stepping into a significant new position of authority. She now stands not only as the proprietor of Graceland, but also as the primary custodian of the family legacy. She determined that the time had come to disclose chapters of the history that had never been broadcast. This decision was made not for the sake of media spectacle, but to foster genuine understanding, not to exploit the past, but to establish a connection. Nevertheless, Riley has been unequivocal in her statement. The second floor of the mansion will remain strictly off limits to the general public. These revelations are intended to provide supporters with a profound emotional bridge to Elvis rather than physical access to his private chambers. Certain sanctuaries, she stated, are destined to remain private. However, privacy does not necessarily equate to secrecy on all fronts. This brings us to the question that continues to circulate: is Elvis Presley still alive? It remains the most persistent conspiracy theory in popular culture. Is it within the realm of possibility that Elvis Presley staged his own demise and evacuated via a tunnel constructed beneath Graceland? While this narrative resembles the plot of a high-stakes espionage thriller to this day, thousands of devoted followers are convinced it is not merely plausible. They are certain it actually occurred. What propels this theory is not simply blind adoration or tabloid fabrication. Rather, it is a series of highly irregular circumstances surrounding his final days that draws suspicion. Points of interest include his demand for absolute privacy and the architectural blueprint of Graceland itself, which some allege contains a clandestine subterranean passage designed specifically for a rapid disappearance. Did the King of Rock and Roll utilise a covert tunnel to flee the grounds of Graceland? Many observers argue that he may well have done so simply due to the magnitude of his fame. Rumours regarding this tunnel have been in circulation for nearly 5 decades. According to testimony from former Graceland staff members and unverified visitor reports, there is alleged to be a concealed corridor leading from the main residence to the rear of the estate, or perhaps even further. One prevalent theory suggests the excavation extends beneath the meditation garden, terminating at an unmarked exit in the wooded sector behind the property boundaries. The strategic purpose of such a passage varies depending on the source. It was either a security measure to evade the paparazzi or an emergency extraction route strictly for use in the event he decided to vanish permanently. Proponents of this hypothesis point to Elvis's escalating paranoia throughout the 1970s as corroborating evidence. Reports confirm he had the residence swept for surveillance devices, he ceased regular touring schedules, he began a systematic withdrawal from public engagements. Even within the confines of Graceland, he rarely ventured from the second floor. This was not merely reclusive behaviour, it was a total strategic withdrawal. For those who believe this isolation was the prelude to a grand design. But what constitutes the evidence for the tunnel itself? Is there any forensic proof of its existence? The official blueprints of Graceland released to the public contain no record of such a structure, yet it is known these documents are redacted by design. The second floor of the mansion is also omitted from public plans, and the existence of that area is an indisputable fact. Some former employees have categorically denied the tunnel's existence. Others have stated somewhat cryptically that there are features of the estate that not even the staff are permitted to see. The Presley family has never officially acknowledged a tunnel in any press interview, memoir or authorised documentary production. However, this official silence has not deterred independent investigators from attempting to substantiate the claim. In 1987, a freelance journalist reportedly breached security on the property and alleged he discovered a partially obscured concrete entrance near the rear carport. His assertions were never independently verified and no photographic documentation was ever released. Yet once the allegation entered the public sphere, it endured. Following this, the sightings began. The first significant report claiming Elvis was alive emerged in 1978, a mere year after his alleged death. A man bearing a striking resemblance to Presley was reportedly observed boarding a commercial flight at Memphis International Airport under the pseudonym John Burroughs. This is not a randomly selected alias. John Burroughs was the precise false name Elvis had utilised repeatedly when registering at hotels during his tours. The sighting was covered by local news outlets at the time, but was largely dismissed by authorities as a coincidence. Nevertheless, it triggered a cascade of similar accounts. In 1984, a tourist visiting the Graceland estate captured a photograph of a groundskeeper resting behind the main house. That image achieved mass circulation, or at least as much viral status as a photograph could achieve in the 1980s. Supporters insisted the individual was Elvis. He was wearing sunglasses, possessed Presley's facial structure, and appeared heavier, consistent with how Elvis might have looked had he aged naturally. The photograph was enlarged, forensically analysed, and subjected to intense scrutiny by the community. Yet to this day, the administration at Graceland has never disclosed the true identity of the man in the photo. Subsequent sightings continued to be reported. There were reports of Elvis in Michigan, Elvis at a fast food establishment in Texas, and Elvis observed attending a tribute show in Nevada. One of the most perplexed reports was filed in 1994 when a man matching his description reportedly entered a Department of Motor Vehicles office in California. The clerk on duty described him as polite and reserved, noting that he paid strictly in cash. When requested to provide a name, he reportedly replied, "That is not important." The security surveillance footage, if it ever existed, has never been released to the public. Another critical component of this theory hinges on the official documentation regarding Elvis's death. Investigative reporters and amateur sleuths alike have long scrutinised the official documentation surrounding the death, drawing attention to glaring anomalies within the death certificate itself, specifically regarding the orthography of his middle name. While the artist's birth certificate and legal documents identified him as Aaron, a single A, spelling the grave marker and the coroner's paperwork inexplicably display the double A variation Aaron, sparking immediate controversy. For those who subscribe to the theory that the king survives, this orthographic discrepancy is viewed not as a clerical error, but as a deliberate coded message, indicating that the individual interred at Graceland is an imposter. However, we must ask the fundamental question: what would drive a global icon to stage his own demise? The prevailing narrative points to severe exhaustion, as reports from the late 1970s describe a man crippled by chronic agony, battling severe dependency issues, and utterly disillusioned with the machinery of stardom. The theory suggests he reached a breaking point where he became convinced that total erasure from the public consciousness was the only viable path to survival. In this scenario, orchestrating a fraudulent death stands as the sole exit strategy that would guarantee him a life of anonymity and peace. Proponents of this hypothesis argue that Presley possessed the vast financial resources, the network of loyal associates, and the secluded infrastructure, potentially including rumoured subterranean tunnels beneath his estate, required to execute such a complex extraction. It is crucial to note, however, that despite decades of speculation, there remains zero credible forensic data to support the claim that he survived past August 16th, 1977. Investigators have found no matching genetic material, no verified fingerprints post-dating the event, and absolutely no authenticated communication. Furthermore, a complete autopsy was conducted. The body was positively identified by immediate family, and the funeral was a widely broadcast public event. While the alleged sightings of the singer over the decades make for compelling tabloid headlines, they invariably rely on low-resolution photography and unsubstantiated hearsay that fails to stand up to rigorous scrutiny. Furthermore, a significant number of these so-called eyewitnesses have subsequently retracted their testimony or admitted to fabrication as the years have rolled by. Nevertheless, the engine driving these conspiracy theories is the extreme seclusion of Presley's final months, during which he effectively vanished from the public lens and was not photographed for an extended period. He had ceased all touring operations and, perhaps most significantly, had retreated almost exclusively to the second floor of the Graceland mansion, a private sanctuary that remains strictly off-limits to the public even today. This profound silence created an information void, and as the old political adage goes, nature absolutely abhors a vacuum. Consequently, the public imagination has rushed to fill that void with elaborate narratives fueled by the romantic notion that the king of rock and roll chose to drop the curtain on his own terms rather than succumbing to tragedy. Riley Keough, now the steward of this massive legacy, feels no pressure to litigate every whisper in the press, understanding that the enigma surrounding her grandfather is a key component of his immortality. She has stated on numerous occasions that her mandate is not to deconstruct the man for the masses, but to safeguard the aspects of his life that he held sacred. Whether that stewardship involves protecting his emotional history or keeping the doors to his private suite firmly locked, she maintains the position that certain questions are not owed an answer. It is entirely possible that the rumoured escape tunnels are nothing more than architectural fiction. Perhaps the sightings were merely cases of mistaken identity projected by grieving fans, and the name on the tombstone was simply a family's attempt to correct a birth record they felt was wrong. Alternatively, for a figure whose entire existence was consumed by the spotlight, the act of keeping one final secret could be interpreted as the ultimate rebellion against the world that owned him. Turning our attention now to the succession of power, we examine the current state of the Graceland Empire. A pressing question remains, is the official Presley lineage actually comprehensive for decades? Whispers have circulated suggesting Elvis may have fathered progeny other than Lisa Marie. These rumours allude to children whose very existence was either suppressed by the estate's machinery or outright denied by the singer himself. In recent years, several of these potential heirs have emerged from the shadows, presenting what they assert is tangible evidence ranging from DNA test results to birth records and photographs displaying a striking physical likeness. Others have taken more aggressive action, filing formal litigation in hopes of securing not only the prestigious surname, but also a lucrative percentage of the multi-million-dollar holdings. Although the judicial system has largely discarded or ignored the majority of these petitions, their persistent recurrence serves to complicate an already labyrinthine historical narrative. This brings us to the critical issue of corporate governance. Who exactly holds the keys to the Elvis empire in the year 2026? Furthermore, is the fortress of the estate vulnerable to external legal challenges? The assets in question are not merely sentimental, they represent a massive fortune. However, the estate is fortified by a complex web of legal trusts and protective structures designed specifically to repel outside claimants. We turn now to Priscilla Presley, who has been vocal during the high-stakes legal manoeuvring regarding her role as a trustee for the estate of her late daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. Following the patriarch's death in 1977, the title to Graceland passed to his sole heir, Lisa Marie. Upon her tragic passing in 2023, that title transferred to her eldest daughter, Riley Keough. Yet reports indicate that this intergenerational transfer was anything but seamless. The handover was immediately marred by a contentious legal challenge filed by Priscilla Presley, contesting the validity of a 2016 amendment to the family trust. While the parties eventually reached a settlement behind closed doors, the dispute laid bare a critical truth. The Presley inheritance is not merely a matter of family honour. It is a battlefield of intellectual property and real estate valued in the hundreds of millions, which is precisely why the theories regarding secret illegitimate children continue to gain traction. Our research indicates that over the last 40 years, no fewer than 12 individuals have come forward claiming a direct biological link to the music legend. While the vast majority of these assertions are confined to supermarket tabloids, a handful have escalated to the point of entering the court system. In one notable case, a man purporting to be the king's son sought a judicial order to exhume the body for genetic testing, a request that was summarily rejected by the presiding judge. In a separate incident, a woman claiming to be a daughter submitted a DNA sample allegedly extracted from a lock of hair sold at auction, hoping to scientifically establish paternity. The attorneys representing the estate swiftly categorised the evidence as scientifically dubious and refused to engage further with the claimant. The entity known as the Elvis Presley Trust operates as a formidable legal shield, managing not only the tangible assets but also the global licensing rights and the likeness of the star. To successfully pierce this veil and achieve legal standing as a beneficiary, any potential claimant would be required to provide irrefutable biological evidence, maintaining a strict chain of custody that proves a genetic match beyond any reasonable doubt. As history has shown, crossing that threshold is a nearly impossible task. Reports indicate that the genetic evidence frequently cited in these paternity suits often lacks a rigorous chain of custody, relying instead on biological material harvested from dubious collectibles, unverified auctions, or third-party acquisitions that were never subjected to clinical sterility. From a jurisprudential standpoint, the vast majority of these motions are legally frivolous and are almost invariably dismissed with prejudice long before they can proceed to an evidentiary hearing or a final court judgment. Despite the lack of concrete proof, the rumour mill continues to churn with relentless energy, driven by a faction of the fan base convinced that the king maintained clandestine liaisons throughout the 1950s and 60s, concurrent with his courtship and marriage to Priscilla. Certain names continue to surface with clockwork regularity within the darker corners of conspiracy message boards and the dusty archives of supermarket tabloids, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of speculation. The narrative usually follows a specific pattern involving women who allege they were on the receiving end of substantial financial settlements, hush money payments, or confidential correspondence well past the height of his global superstardom. It is crucial to note that neither the estate nor any surviving members of the Presley inner circle have ever corroborated these accounts through official public channels. Keough has maintained a disciplined, stoic silence regarding these would-be claimants, steadfastly following the precedent of non-engagement set by her late mother, Lisa Marie. This strategic radio silence has paradoxically only fanned the flames of conjecture, leading analysts to ask, is this a calculated legal manoeuvre to starve baseless allegations of oxygen? Or is there a remote possibility, however statistically insignificant, that this discretion is designed to shield a sensitive private reality from the public eye? That question remains a matter of open debate. What remains indisputable in the current landscape of 2026 is the shift in power. Keough has firmly established herself as the undisputed matriarch of the Graceland enterprise. At just 36 years of age, she has secured control over a sprawling commercial and cultural dynasty, an empire defined by complex intellectual property rights, 9-figure licensing agreements, and massive public scrutiny. Sources close to the estate confirm her stewardship is far from ceremonial. She is entrenched in the granular details of the operation, wielding executive power over decisions both trivial and monumental. She is reportedly holding regular strategy meetings with top-tier archivists, historical preservationists and financial trustees, while retaining veto power over every new exhibition proposed for the complex. Furthermore, she is spearheading a massive digital infrastructure overhaul designed to ensure that every artifact from Elvis's biography, including fragile handwritten scrawls and personal memos, is protected. The objective is to ensure that original master tapes and unseen photographic negatives are digitized and catalogued with state-of-the-art metadata protocols to maintain absolute archival integrity for future generations. However, beyond the logistics of asset management, Keough has shouldered a much heavier burden. She is now the ultimate arbiter of the Presley narrative and historical record. This is a Herculean task, given that Elvis Presley has transcended the role of a mere musician to become a monolithic American institution and symbol. He embodies a volatile era of history representing a collision of segregation and integration, supreme artistic innovation and tragic self-destruction, conservative values and rebellious counterculture. Keough occupies a unique geopolitical space in the entertainment landscape, serving simultaneously as a grieving blood relative and the gatekeeper of a billion-dollar cultural brand. Her mandate is to reintroduce the humanity into a figure often reduced to a caricature, reminding the world that the icon was, in fact, a man. That is a diplomatic tightrope walk of the highest order. And by all accounts, she has navigated this treacherous terrain with remarkable political savvy thus far. On the record, she has emphasised that the Memphis estate must remain a vibrant living entity rather than a static mausoleum, citing her own childhood nostalgia within those walls as a guiding principle. The strategy is not preservation in amber, but rather contextual evolution. As she stated, the goal is not to freeze him in time, but to ensure his complexity is fully comprehended. To that end, the estate is forging alliances with major academic institutions to elevate the discourse, moving the revenue model beyond simple tourism and into the realm of serious scholarship. Her vision is for Elvis to be examined not merely as a celebrity, but as a critical case study in the mechanics of fame, racial dynamics, musical evolution, and the shifting tides of cultural identity. Furthermore, the expansion of the brand's digital presence is being handled with restraint. You will not see cheap virtual reality gimmicks, but rather a sophisticated, curated media library. Behind the closed doors of the archive, her team is utilising advanced technology to preserve the fragility of Elvis's handwritten lyrics and personal thoughts. They are employing high-resolution scanning technology and artificial intelligence for categorisation to preserve set lists and letters that were previously at risk of deterioration. These assets are being prepped for serious academic inquiry and future museum curation signalling that Keough is not merely liquidating assets, but structuring a long-term legacy. In exercising this authority, she is also drawing hard lines regarding privacy, acting as a firewall around the aspects of the family history that are not for public consumption. She has strictly maintained the embargo on the second floor of the mansion, refusing access to tourists and press alike to preserve the sanctity of the private quarters. We are told she has summarily rejected lucrative offers for reality television crews to invade the property, maintaining a zero-tolerance policy for sensationalism or fictionalised drama. For the heiress, this protective stance is about honouring the man behind the myth, prioritising the dignity of the person over the profitability of the legend. That implies a willingness to protect the nuance of his struggles, respecting the chapters of his life that were chaotic, unflattering, or deeply painful. Should any credible evidence of a secret heir ever actually materialise someone with a biological claim to the throne, the final adjudication will not happen in the court of public opinion, but at Riley's desk. It will not be decided by a magistrate, a journalist, or a viral social media campaign. And that centralisation of power is perhaps what unsettles the conspiracy theorists the most. She effectively holds the keys to the kingdom, meaning the final chapter of this saga, or the opening of the next one, is entirely under her jurisdiction. This brings us to the holy grail of musicology. Are there truly unreleased master tapes hidden within the vaults of Graceland songs that the public has never heard? For decades, industry insiders have whispered about tapes produced during the singer's twilight years, potentially stored in the restricted living quarters or the sealed upstairs suites. It is a matter of historical record that the King continued to record vocal tracks in private settings, persisting with his art even after he had largely retreated from the glare of the public spotlight. His final documented sessions were conducted at Graceland itself, specifically within the famous Jungle Room, during February and October of 1976. These recordings yielded raw, visceral performances, including tracks like Way Down and Moody Blue, along with emotional renditions of gospel standards. While the record label released a portion of this output posthumously, audio engineers and session musicians have long suggested that the archives are incomplete. Reports persist that several tracks were either left in a fragmented state or deliberately shelved due to the erratic nature of the performances caused by his declining health. The narrative surrounding these potential artefacts has been severely complicated by an aggressive black market. For decades, a deluge of illicit recordings dubbed the Lost Tapes has flooded the underground circuit, appearing on everything from dusty vinyls to obscure cassette trades. Investigative analysis confirms that a fraction of these materials are indeed legitimate, offering rare glimpses into outtakes or alternate studio sessions of the music icon's most famous hits. However, a significant portion raises serious red flags, with forensic audio experts warning that many tracks feature vocals that merely mimic the King, likely the work of skilled impersonators or advanced audio manipulation technologies designed to deceive collectors. One particularly notorious case that gripped the industry in the 1990s involved a widely circulated bootleg alleging to contain a never-before-heard ballad titled "This Is Goodbye." The provenance of the recording was touted as being from the final weeks of Presley's life, adding a morbid and sensational layer to its marketing that captivated the public. That claim unravelled after audio analysis conclusively matched the vocal fingerprint to a well-known tribute artist. Yet despite this debunking, the global appetite for these phantom tapes has not diminished one bit. But the driving force behind this enduring conspiracy isn't merely the illicit bootleg market, it is the profound and strategic silence emanating from the estate itself. While the vaults of other musical icons like Bob Dylan or the Beatles have been systematically cracked open for comprehensive public consumption, the personal archives of Elvis Presley remain under what can only be described as maximum security. To be sure, corporate giants like RCA and Sony have issued numerous deluxe box sets featuring alternate takes, but these are highly sanitized corporate-controlled releases that represent only a fraction of the full picture. There is a distinct line drawn between commercially viable material cleared for the masses and the potential treasure trove that reportedly sits gathering dust within the private sanctums of Graceland. The sealed upper floors of the mansion, strictly off-limits to the public, and most staff continue to generate intense speculation among historians and industry insiders alike. Keough, who assumed full control of the estate following the tragic passing of Lisa Marie Presley in 2023, has gone on record confirming that these private quarters remain virtually undisturbed. In recent interviews, she has characterised the space as a literal time capsule, effectively frozen in the exact state it was left in nearly 5 decades ago. While Keough has been careful not to explicitly confirm the existence of hidden audio reels, her references to uncatalogued personal artefacts suggest a vast inventory that the public has never seen nor heard. Keough noted her mother's deep, intuitive connection to the space, suggesting a stewardship that went beyond mere property management, and hinted at a protective stance over the sensitive materials within. Corroborating this, professional archivists affiliated with Graceland have indicated that the contents of specific high-security zones, particularly the master bedroom and the private study, have not yet undergone a full digital audit. This untouched inventory reportedly includes personal correspondence, literary collections, and crucially uncatalogued physical media that could potentially redefine the singer's discography. Adding fuel to the fire, a leaked report from a former estate employee surfaced on an exclusive forum alleging the discovery of a reel-to-reel recorder in the upstairs study, accompanied by a stack of cryptic, unlabelled tapes. While estate officials have refused to comment on these specific allegations, the rumour has gained significant traction because it aligns perfectly with the established historical habits of the singer. It is a matter of historical record that Presley frequently utilised home recording equipment to capture casual performances, vocal warm-ups and raw concept demos intended only for his inner circle. These sessions were never intended for commercial consumption. They were deeply personal diaries in audio form, offering an unfiltered look at the artist behind the curtain. The late Felton Jarvis Presley's longtime producer is on record stating that the volume of material recorded by the legend far exceeds the official discography released by RCA. Jarvis referenced late-night jam sessions and rough piano improvisations that were deliberately kept off the corporate radar, as Presley was reportedly hesitant to share these vulnerable moments with the world at that time. The pressing question now facing historians and fans in 2026 is whether these fragile magnetic tapes have survived the ravages of time and temperature. Are they still sitting in a dark cabinet on the second floor of Graceland that remains the ultimate unsolved mystery of the music world? Thank you for tuning in to this special report. For ongoing coverage of this story and other breaking entertainment news, make sure to hit the subscribe button and like this video to support our investigative journalism. Stay tuned to this channel as further updates on this developing story are expected shortly.